Greetings and welcome to the launch of the RIMS Bermuda 2020 webinar series presented by RIMS and the Bermuda Business Development Agency. This session is titled The Bermuda Market, Past, Present, and Future. This session will be hosted by Jasmine DeSilva, Business Development Manager of Risk and Insurance Solutions for the BDA, and she will be joined by an esteemed panel whom she will introduce shortly. I am Justin Smolison, Business Content Manager at RIMS, the Risk and Insurance Management Society. A few notes before we begin. If you have a question for our presenters during today's session, please submit them by writing in the question box and not the chat box, and feel free to ask at any point in the presentation. We will reserve time at the end of the presentation for Q&A. John Huff will moderate that segment. Following this session, the recording will be available on Opus Ed and Risk Knowledge, the RIMS online content library. All downloads and related contact information will be accessible to the sponsor. And on to today's session. The Bermuda reinsurance market is unique. It is a capital-efficient jurisdiction with global access to the world's major markets. It has always been at the forefront of creating innovative products for risk-based solutions. Today, we will hear industry experts discuss the market's history, the current environment, and where they see future opportunities and challenges. RIMS and the Bermuda Business Development Agency are thrilled to be joined by a large global audience. Welcome, everyone. BDA Business Development Manager Jasmine DeSilva will introduce our panels and begin the discussion.
Thank you, Justin, and good afternoon, everyone. I've been really looking forward to the start of the RIMS Bermuda webinar series. It's the first of its kind, and so I'm delighted to welcome you all to this opening episode, which is one of 5. Bermuda is one of the world's most important insurance and reinsurance hubs. We have always been at the forefront of providing innovative solutions to increasingly complex risk. And I can tell you as a Bermudian, that's something that I'm intensely proud of. This webinar series was created and developed to share knowledge and information from some of our industry experts at a time when it is arguably more important than ever to do so. And so across the 5 episodes, what we've done is put the spotlight on key issues and trends currently shaping the risk management landscape and Bermuda's unique role in addressing them all. It seems only right that we kick off the series with an overview of Bermuda market itself. And so today we have joining us John Huff, who's the President and CEO of the Association of Bermuda Insurance and Reinsurers. ABIR members comprise the world's leading companies and do business in more than 150 countries. So John is well placed to moderate today's session. We also have Kirsten Beasley. She's the head of healthcare broking for North America at Willis Towers Watson. Albert Benchimol, President and CEO of Axis Capital. Chris Bonard, who is the CEO of Ed Broking Bermuda. Heather Kitson, who's the Deputy CEO of Convex Bermuda. And so without further ado, John, I'm going to leave it to you to continue the session.
Thanks very much, Jasmine, and thanks to RIMS and the BDA for sponsoring this webinar series. We all miss the energy and the innovation and the content from the RIMS event that was scheduled in Denver, but hopefully you'll be able to get a snapshot of that not only today, but for the next 4 Wednesdays. And we're so pleased to have really a world-class panel joining us today to talk about Bermuda. They've just been introduced to you, so I won't go through their bios, but I'll have them kick off with their introductions by naming the top 3 drivers of what brought them and their companies to Bermuda. And we'll kick off with Albert Benchimol, the CEO of Axis Capital, and this year the chair of the Association of Bermuda Insurers and Reinsurers. Albert?
Thank you, John, and thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this panel. There are so many reasons to want to be in Bermuda, and Axis is incredibly proud to be a citizen of Bermuda. But if I had to really cut it down to 3, key drivers, I would say speed to market is number 1. I would say global market access, it's unmatched global market access. And number 3, embedded agility, the ability to really respond to market opportunities. I'd love to spend more on that, but love to hear what other members have to say.
Great, Albert, and we'll unpack that in just a moment. We'll turn to Kirsten Beasley. No one better to talk about Bermuda than a Bermudian. Kirsten, what's your take?
Thanks, John. I appreciate the time today. There are definitely three standout things for me that the Bermuda market brings to the table. First and foremost, capacity. Bermuda is the home of solving the insurance needs of large and complex entities. Our innovation, again, the birthplace of captives and coverage innovations such as integrated occurrence. And then finally, our intellectual capital. Our people truly are our value. We have such a concentrated pool of well-recognized experts in their field, the value of which cannot be underestimated.
Great, thanks, Kirsten. Chris, Ed Broking just joined Bermuda last year, 2019. Tell us what brought you here. Well, Chris, we're having a little trouble with your audio. Are you on mute by chance?
Sorry, apologies. First one to do it. Yeah, so for us as a global broker, the ability to actually access Bermuda is very, very key. It's the second largest insurance market in the world, the largest ILS market in the world, and the largest captive market in the world. So as we work with our customers and we look for capacity and we're agnostic to where we place it, for us to not be here was a huge omission to be in such an important marketplace. So that's what brought us here. Looking at obviously the distribution, the opportunity to bring independent business to this island, I think it's a huge chance now for this marketplace. And I think as the environment changes, you know, we find that Bermuda should do very, very well and provide a great product for its customers.
Great, thanks, Chris. And then our final panelist, Heather Kitson from Convex, announced last year the largest insurance startup in the island's history. Heather, tell us what brought Convex to Bermuda.
Thanks, John. And, you know, it's an incredible opportunity for Bermuda and also for me to work with Stephen Catlin and Paul Brand and the truly fantastic team that have rejoined to work together. You know, last year we were a new entrant and we've received an AM Best rating of A- and supported by long-term 10-year money. And we expect to be here in the long term. You know, as a Bermudian and someone who's worked on Ireland and in the industry for the last 15 years, I feel, you know, incredibly proud that Convex chose to set up here in Bermuda. And, you know, although I wasn't part of that decision, I was hired shortly after the capital raise. I think the three main reasons that I pick out that my colleagues chose to set up in Bermuda is really the strength and depth of the Bermuda insurance and reinsurance market. It's a great place to do business. It's one of the leading reinsurance centers in the world and the largest supplier of catastrophe reinsurance in the US market. It's an incredibly important marketplace, and it just made sense for Convex to set up a platform here in Bermuda as well as in London, offering a consistent offering between London and Bermuda. I think secondly, I'd highlight our regulatory environment here. The ease and speed that we were able to set up in Bermuda was really an outstanding reason to choose Bermuda, together with a creative risk environment to offer nimble solutions for our clients. I think that the BMA, being an internationally respected regulator, was a key driver for us. And I know that we're going to touch on Solvency II and NAIC reciprocal status. And then finally, I'd highlight the strength of our jurisdiction. Bermuda is an incredibly strong jurisdiction with a strong, stable government. And I feel that the current administration has really stood out well in this current pandemic. And the legal system in Bermuda is founded on English law, with Privy Council being the highest court of appeal. So strong government, strong legal system, great market.
Great, thanks, Heather. Albert, you just heard another reference to speed to market. So maybe we'll unpack your three drivers: speed to market, global market access, and embedded agility. So maybe kick off with speed to market.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think it's also important that perhaps I can make my comments, put them in the context of the theme of today, which is past, present, and future, because Heather just spoke about how very recently in the present, it's been very, very responsive, and the ability to create a new company in very little time. But this is not just new. I mean, this is something that has been a feature of Bermuda for 40 years. There's been a commitment made that this was going to be the capital of global risk transfer. And Bermuda's delivered on this from the very beginning, whether it was captives. In 1984-85, we talked about ACE and Excel. In 1993, right after Hurricane Andrew, we had a number of companies, and there was a real crisis in 92, 93. The world was not aware of just how bad CAT could be. The capacity of CAT dried up, and literally between Hurricane Andrew and 1/1/1993, we had the ability to replace capital and allow for an efficient risk transfer. We did it again post the World Trade Center. We did it again after Katrina, Rita, Wilma, and here we are today with a new member with Convex. So the ability to move quickly, if you've got good capital, if you've got respectable management, you've got a good business plan, you can come to market almost in a matter of weeks. And there is no other market that can do that for you. And so it's happened in the past, it's happened in the present, and I have no doubt it'll happen in the future. The second issue, which is really critical to me, is the fact that from Bermuda, this little island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, you can access the entire world. We actually have favored access to almost every single insurance and reinsurance market in the world. And that, I have to give full credit to the government and to the regulator here, because as small an island as it is one of the most respected regulatory environments, the BMA, across the world. And there's been a real teamwork between government, making sure that we have the right legislation, the right cooperation with all of the governance bodies in the world, the BMA and the industry, understanding that there's a shared success in Bermuda to work together. And so we worked together and ensured that we were one of the first countries to be recognized as Solvency II equivalent. And very recently also getting equivalence with the NAIC in the United States. I think there are only 2 jurisdictions in the entire world that are recognized both by Solvency II and by the US. So for us here to be able to access the entire globe of risk transfer is incredibly efficient. And I believe Jasmine pointed out, we've, ABIR members, do business in over 150 countries. And this is something that benefits not simply risk transfer in those other countries, it benefits the local markets because we have a very large number of staff across the world. So we contribute to local economies, local insurance markets, all over the world based from our home base here. And then the last comment that I was going to point to was this embedded agility. And one of the things that I find most attractive in Bermuda is that we can tactically respond very quickly. We can allocate our capital back and forth between different lines of business, again, to respond to the opportunity. But Bermuda itself has also been very agile in terms of recognizing what are the new trends in risk transfer. And, captives were an incredible thing, 40, 50 years ago. And then we had new companies set up, excess companies set up, and we've had new organizations. But it's also a great place for sidecars. It's a great place for ILS. So we are the largest ILS market in the world. And I have no idea what the future will bring, but I'm pretty confident that Bermuda will jump on the opportunities and be part of the future. So those attributes are really, really strong. And if you permit me, I would like to add one more thing. Because of these strong attributes, Bermuda has attracted incredible talent, and Heather just spoke to that a second ago. And what's happening here is that we've attracted great talent, great entrepreneurial companies, and it ups our game. I've said this before, this is a little bit like the Silicon Valley of insurance. We challenge each other to always move forward. And so that kind of tension, competitive tension, keeps Bermuda at the forefront of innovation. I'm really, really proud to be here.
Thank you, Albert. Let me stay with you, if I may. You're not only an global insurance leader, but as chair of ABIR, you're also a community leader in Bermuda. So maybe you can give us paint a little bit of a picture of how Bermuda's doing during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Bermuda's doing great. I have to say that I've been incredibly impressed by how Bermuda's responded to the COVID-19. And I don't know, you wish other countries in the world would have followed the approach. But I will say the government very quickly jumped on the situation here and has been on the forefront of making sure that they've frankly limited transport into the island. There's been testing for the most exposed populations. We very quickly went into shelter in place here, and it's been really disciplined. And not only has the government established great policies, I want to commend the population of Bermuda because they recognized what the issue was. We know a lot of countries have put in place a lot of policies, but they weren't always followed. I would say that the compliance in Bermuda has been very, very strong. They had limited going out and engaging in community to essential services, including shopping, obviously, banking. But I'm a B, and I could only do my shopping on Mondays and Thursdays. And there was a real clarity that, and the reason for doing that was making sure that you had limited number of people on the road, and importantly, limited number of people in stores, which reduced the opportunity for the transfer of the virus. And so they were really good. We were able to limit the number of cases. Thank God, we've had a very limited number of fatalities. And because they were early to take serious action, the government is now reopening the economy. And so we've got a number of economic activities that are now started again. We can start to engage. And of course, we're going to be monitoring that to make sure that we sustain a very low level of incidence of COVID. I have to say, we do business in a lot of countries. I personally live in a lot of countries. I think Bermuda's handled it really, really well. As to the industry, we've always been on the forefront of technology. And so the industry, the insurance and reinsurance industry in Bermuda has transitioned seamlessly to a work from home environment. Essentially, all of us have kept 100% of our capabilities, continuing to serve our customers, doing all of the various renewals that we've had for the various treaties that we've needed to deal with, including the most recent June 1 renewals in Florida. And essentially, all of us have done it from home. And so the industry has been able to transition to a work from home environment and continue to contribute to the Bermuda economy, but also contribute to the global economy by participating in a healthy risk transfer industry.
Thank you, Albert. And just picking up on our theme about also the future of Bermuda, now in this new normal, if you will, post-COVID-19, what are some of your predictions and threats and challenges and opportunities for Bermuda?
I think that the challenges that the industry and that the world faces are actually opportunities for Bermuda, because that's how Bermuda's always positioned itself. And one of the things that I find very exciting, and I've said this to so many people, I'm really sad that I'm 62. I wish I were 10 years younger, because there's going to be so many exciting things happening in the industry. I think COVID has taught us so much about risk, but also how we can work together. And I think the value of technology, the value of digital, and the ability to combine work from home with work from office and so on. I think the way that we deliver our risk transfer products and services is going to change over time. And I think that there will be real opportunities for innovation, and Bermuda already is at the forefront of innovation, and it's part of our culture. I would say there's probably new ways of thinking about risks. And so I think, again, given that we are the risk transfer capital of the world, I think we'll be able to take advantage and be part of the solution. One of the great things about Bermuda is that we're actually very humble about our place in the world. We're an island in the middle of the ocean, and we recognize that there are a lot of different markets in the world, and they reflect their local cultures and their local practices. And we respect the fact that every country and every market will respond to these challenges in their own way. What they can rest assured of is that we in Bermuda will be flexible enough so that we will not create a one-size-fits-all approach to our partnering with local markets. We will adjust our approach to make sure that we provide the right response to the US market, the right response to the European market, the right response to other local markets, so that they get what they need for their market. And that, I think, is going to be a very exciting opportunity for Bermuda.
Great, thanks, Albert. Appreciate it very much. Kirsten, maybe we'll turn to you, and folks may not realize that your business, although your title has health in it, it's really more medical liability or casualty coverage. Maybe you can talk to us about how Bermuda has helped your business or built your business.
Yeah, thank you, John. I think the story about healthcare in Bermuda really parallels the broader story of insurance, the insurance evolution in Bermuda. Bermuda carriers have written healthcare liability since the inception of our marketplace in the 1980s, when healthcare institutions came to the island to tap into capacity to round out their large towers of insurance. However, I really don't think it was until the early 2000s that Bermuda really developed extensive and dedicated specialty expertise And that was really following the exit of a significant medical malpractice carrier in 2001, St. Paul. On the heels of that exit, obviously we had 9/11 happen. And it was within that environment that several startups formed: Endurance, Allied World, Endurance now Sampo, I should say, Allied World Arch, and I think I'm forgetting one, perhaps maybe Axis. And it really, those startups, again, speed to market being a theme that a number of us have touched on. Those markets that formed in 2002 really highlight the speed to market that Bermuda can bring. Several of those markets invested quite heavily in healthcare expertise. And now, nearly 20 years later, Bermuda really has a robust specialty healthcare market that has deep industry experience. And we've insured as a market at one point, I think, at least 40% of the US's hospitals, which is quite significant. So that really kind of talks about the past and the current state of where we are. Well, obviously, as regards the future, right now the markets are really approaching the healthcare industry with understandable caution because of COVID and the hardening market, and quite frankly, the combination of those two forces. But I think the market conditions actually create a great opportunity for Bermuda going forward to be at the forefront of solving clients' problems. And I know we're going to touch on that with regard to capacity retrenchment and what's happening with rate and coverage. But I think perhaps the conditions are teeing up opportunities for potentially a class of 2020 or a class of 2021 going forward.
Any other predictions on post-COVID-19 in that sector?
So post-COVID-19, I mean, if I could switch to talking about healthcare, the healthcare industry as a whole, clearly we're all users of it globally. We're all stakeholders in the healthcare system. And I think COVID-19, without a doubt, is going to have a profound long-term and permanent impact on the healthcare industry. You're going to see a lot of investment in e-health or digital health. There's already been a fair amount of investment globally, but I don't think digital health has quite realized its promise. Most of the focus has been around using e-health to record our healthcare interactions. I think we're going to start to see the fulfillment of the promise of e-health to actually change how we deliver healthcare and how healthcare is delivered to us. And I see that as one of the long-standing and permanent trends that are going to arise within the healthcare industry as regards COVID.
Well, Kirsten, I can't let you go without talking about your work on building talent and work in diversity and inclusion in Bermuda.
Yeah.
You've been a leader, and particularly with the We Speak, and I want to give you an opportunity to maybe explain that program a little bit and tell us about how Bermuda's doing with diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, thank you, John. Obviously, you know that diversity and inclusion is a real focus and a passion of mine, and I'm the co-founder of an organization known as We Speak, and our mission really is to provide training for women in presentation and speaking skills. I've been quite public about my struggles with speaking skills, and our data shows that I'm not alone. Many women have difficulty with public speaking, specifically due to lack of training and exposure. And of course, this poses a huge problem for diversity in our industry. That's our responsibility to solve. We all know that speaking up in meetings and doing panels like this are critical for your personal and professional development and progression. And I think it's also an extension of the current social movement, which really highlights the importance of being heard and listened to. And we really want to tap into that spirit. We want to help Bermuda's women, particularly women of color, to use their voices with the ultimate goal that our industry and Bermuda's workforce is more reflective of our society's rich diversity. So I'm very passionate about We Speak. We have a fantastic board of women leaders that are committed to progressing our mission. And in fact, my co-panelist, Heather, is one of our We Speak trained coaches. So, yeah.
Great, thanks for your leadership there. I was so impressed with your event earlier this year. An event anywhere of this size is significant, but to have 750 people in Bermuda assemble to hear about your program was fantastic.
Yeah, it's been widely received, and I would say stay tuned and watch this space for more as we start to pivot out of the COVID-19 clampdown.
Great, thanks, Kirsten, for your leadership. Chris, I thought I'd turn to you and talk about technology. That's your strength at Ed Broking, and maybe tell us where you see Bermuda going and how it might change the way of doing business, particularly post-COVID-19.
Absolutely. Well, I think the fact that we're all sitting on this conference digitally now shows that the world has changed. There's words like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, House Party that most of us either didn't use very often or hadn't heard of. So I think the medium in which we're actually operating has changed overnight for the whole world, and the technology piece on it is really going to make a difference for those that win and those that lose. I think Albert said earlier, Bermuda's always been at the forefront of technology. It was a big attraction to us when coming over here that we've got a government that's very pro-technology. We've got a regulator that's pro-technology, and we believe that ultimately there'll be a lot of trading digitally. If you take a look at the overall financial services world, I mean, the banking industry changed many, many, many years ago. You know, we spend our lives on telephones, which are iPads, iPhones. Every medium we use is technology-based, but historically for the insurance industry, we've always used paper and found old-fashioned ways of doing it. So I believe we're going to see a change. I think historically we would have probably seen bite-sized chunks of the elephant in terms of how technology would impact insurance. I believe COVID-19 could be our big bang moment. And I think people are actually fast forwarding on how they use technology now. I mean, we've seen that Brit Insurance Company have now come out with a joint venture with Google on a product called Key. We've seen even this morning, you know, Lloyd's of London saying they're actually allowing people to write more business that use innovation and technology to improve their business. We all know that we need to reduce acquisition costs and make a more cost-effective product to the customer. So I think this is going to be the moment that changes things. And I think there will be winners and losers in there. Now, I'm pleased to say being here in Bermuda in the right regulation, the right government and the right innovation puts us in a very strong place.
Tell us how you think that using technology will help tap into or allow seeding companies, for instance, to access the tremendous capital and capacity in Bermuda.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I've witnessed in a changing market is the amount of submission flow we're seeing. We've seen the global world go through a correction. Lloyd's of London had, you know, its underwriting process, you know, last year. We've seen the domestic US market change, and what that has done is had a huge influx of submissions coming to the Bermuda market. There's been a ton of independent business out there that hasn't historically been in Bermuda, maybe too small, doesn't know how to find its way to Bermuda. So we truly believe that using technology as a medium to bring business over, to triage business, to really put risks at the top of the pile, and more importantly, match risk, capital, and exposure together is the way forward. So, you know, in a marketplace here, which is, you know, a lot of large carriers, but with very senior, limited number of resources in terms of underwriters relative to other companies, technology is a bit that will allow them to actually write the right business and allow many, many companies around the world that haven't accessed Bermuda the ability to access.
Well, that's the benefit for the companies, certainly. How about the end customer? How do they benefit from this increased use?
I think the two things really. The first one is the ability to access global capacity. Okay, so if they now have a mechanism to come to this great market where they couldn't before because their risk may have been too small or couldn't find a way to do it, this opens up a door to one of the most important insurance and reinsurance markets in the world. The key thing really for us is where can technology play a difference? We believe in the merging of talent and technology. We don't believe replacing what we do as either brokers or underwriters or people that can actually manage relationships and understand risk and exposure, but we use it and view it as an enabler. And the key point of that enabler is to ultimately deliver a cost-effective product to the customer. We all know that all of our financial services industries are carrying heavy cost burdens. And if we can use technology to bring that cost down, make sure that our insurance markets, our reinsurance markets are sustainable and match their capacity to customer cheaper, then that's a win-win for our clients.
And I'd also be interested in your perspective just on the market generally. Some analysts are saying the market is firming. Some are even going as far as saying the market is hardening. And I know you have an interest in working with captives. How do you think that might change the captive world?
I think we're already seeing it. So having come through, obviously, the Florida renewal season, I think some carriers in Florida will view that the market's hardened. And I think ultimately that will feed itself down to the consumer on the street. we're seeing a lot of risks that are coming on the island where the change in pricing compared to what they've been used to historically has been quite daunting. And then at that point, you see carriers clients looking to either go bare, can't afford to buy product, and that's where you see captive come. I mean, Bermuda, my understanding, obviously new to the island, started as a captive insurance market. It is the oldest and the largest and probably the most experienced market in the world to do captives. And we believe that the right clients that understand their exposure and understand their risk should use captives and should marry that with the reinsurance market, because everything we're seeing through this changing environment is the market is going to get tougher as time goes on. It's not going to get easier in the foreseeable future. You know, we're all hopeful that we see a class of 2020 or 2021 emerge. We hope it's going to be here. I believe it will be here for the reasons that Albert outlined earlier. But ultimately, the market's changing. I mean, the first time that we've seen a change in market, change in loss, and change in capital markets all correlating in one place is pretty unique. So I think we will see a lot more captives come to the fore. And I think the captives merged with reinsurance markets provides so many solutions for clients, and Bermuda's the lead market for that.
Well, let's stay with that theme about the market changing. Heather, I'll turn to you. You returned to Bermuda, I believe, with a company during what Bermudians call the class of 2001. So very interested in your perspectives and observations as you returned to a new company in Bermuda, either a startup or a greenfield, however you want to describe it. But what are your observations?
Thank you, John. And it's really tremendously exciting for me that this isn't my first dance at the disco, so to speak, with a brand new company. And I returned back to Bermuda in 2005 to work for a company that was sort of technically seen as a class of 2001 because it was pre-Katrina, Rita, and Wilma. And I joined that company to be general counsel and company secretary and part of the senior management team in Bermuda. And I remember telling my mum with great enthusiasm, and she said to me that you're going back to Bermuda to be a secretary and type. You know, but really it was a great opportunity for me as a Bermudian working in London to return home and really reinforcing that point in terms of attracting people back to the island and new talent in. And I was very fortunate with somebody who was able to return home for a great opportunity back in 2005. So at that company, we were busy writing, you know, fantastic renewal business in a great market. And then we had Katrina, Rita, and Wilma in the summer, and you know, and that was a challenge for us. And I think it's really critical to highlight the excellent track record of Bermuda and its claims paying ability. The Bermuda market paid around 60% of all Hurricane Katrina losses. And you know, it wasn't easy for us here in Bermuda, and we weathered the storm. And one point that I'd like to make is when we talk about these you know, market changing events, whether it be WTC, Hurricane Katrina, the current pandemic, we really shouldn't lose sight of the human cost. And when we're thinking about opportunities for us, you know, I certainly, and I know those of us on the panel have a great degree of empathy for the suffering, but also a responsibility to develop new and innovative risk solutions for the future. 2020 isn't over yet for us. It feels to me like it's been 3 years already. And you know, we're standing by at Convex and as a Bermuda market to play claims that may result out of this storm season. I think reflecting a little bit further, and given that the title of this panel is Bermuda Past and Present and looking into the future, you know, after KRW, we saw 13 reinsurers downgraded and around 4 went into what was an orderly runoff, but it was a tricky time for some of us in the market. And at the same time, you saw $18 billion of new capital come into Bermuda in the last 3 months of 2005 in the form of new class 4 entrants, some of which are, you know, very well known today. And also we saw sidecars from existing players, which attracted third-party capital into collateralized vehicles. And I think, you know, there may be some similarities to today, but I would continue to draw a distinction between WTC, KRW, and this global pandemic, which has an incredibly broad-ranging nature. And it's, you know, it's very difficult whilst in the midst of it, things to really understand and comprehend those effects. I think that this pandemic is systemic, and although the stock markets have recovered from some of the lowest points earlier this month, I think we're not out of the woods yet in terms of volatility. We're seeing some companies proactively de-risking, and the Bermuda insurance market follows the basic economic principles of supply, demand, and we're seeing decreasing supply, increasing demand. I think we've touched on Florida renewals. Many saw 20 to 30% increase on rate across the board. So we're likely to see continued market hardening. So, John, in answer to your question, do I think that there will be class of 2020, class of 21? I don't know, but I genuinely hope so. And that, we at Convex and in the Bermuda market, it's great, new competition, new thinking, new innovation, raising the bar. Sitting here, which I'm sitting in my living room and not against this beautiful background, but to use a mariner's analogy, that the rising tide will raise all boats. So I really hope that we see new market entrants here in Bermuda. When I spoke earlier, I think speed to market was incredibly impressive and working with the BMA, but I'm not going to underestimate the amount of work that goes into setting up a class 4 reinsurer. And Convex as a greenfield company, we were able to hit the ground running with an experienced management team, and we've been really focusing on building out our foundations and people-centric culture. But that really does take time. It doesn't, whilst it's easy to set up here, really building those strong foundations and building the right values-based culture. It's something that we've been focused on in 2019, and we're well poised for 2020. I think that the pandemic will force us all to think about the way that we engage with our clients. I'd echo the thoughts of my panelists, and transitioning to working from home has been seamless. We've all been able to harness technology. But I think that the strength of our virtual relationships is based on those physical interactions and long-standing, whether they be conferences like RIMS, etc. We're really being able to leverage off that personal contact in the virtual world. And I think that the way that we do business is going to change. We've got a good track record in Bermuda on contract certainty. I'd actually worked on the contract certainty code of conduct with ABIR 10 years ago. And I think the way we think about contract certainty will not just be about ticking boxes and making sure that the clients have signed and we've signed as a market. I think that there's going to be a move for everyone to really understand what that contract means and really meeting our clients' needs. So I think that 2020 will go down as a pivotal moment in Bermuda's insurance history. And this is the world's never going to be the same. This is, with great hardship is going to come great opportunities here. I think we're going to see renewed and increased investor appetite. And, I'm really, really excited to see how this Bermuda story evolves.
Now, Heather, when I first met you, before you were deputy CEO at Convex, you were a regulatory attorney, and I worked with you some in your regulatory representation, representing companies with the regulator. How is the Bermuda Monetary Authority stacking up internationally? And I just read recently they have rejoined the IAIS, the International Association of Insurance Supervisors Executive Committee, which is an accolade for the BMA. But what's your experience been with the BMA?
I mean, I think we've all touched on it, and I think the experience with the BMA has been fantastic. They've shown great leadership, but also incredible pragmatism and innovation. And I think that's really been borne out by the pragmatic guidance. They really got on the front foot in the wake of the very early on in the COVID pandemic and the travel restrictions to Bermuda, and gave some good advice on where companies could hold board meetings and some flexibility around that. But at the same time, they've pushed forwards on economic substance filings and their commitment to tax transparency, which is important. And those filings are due at the end of the 30th of June. Bermuda was an early adopter of the Common Reporting Standard. So I think that You know, and now we are off the blacklist and onto the OECD whitelist, which was, you know, an important move for Bermuda. I think that we're in a good place. I think the last thing I'd like to highlight was the excellent endorsement from the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, CFATA. They came to Bermuda to review our jurisdiction and our strength of regulation in the fight against money laundering and terrorist financing. And you know, what they do is they issue a mutual evaluation report at the end of their inspection. And Bermuda ranked as one of the top 6 in the world. And you know, that was a great endorsement of our regulator, and an enormous amount of work went into that. So the BMA are doing really well, and we're very fortunate to have the strength and flexibility of regulation in Bermuda.
Thanks, Heather. I think I'll turn to some of the questions that have been submitted, and I had a few submitted in advance as well. There's a theme on several questions. We are into the 3rd day of the 1st week of hurricane season, for instance. So just want to open it up for any of the speakers that may want to talk about how you see the hurricane season playing out. And we just finished the June 1 renewals for Florida, for instance. And any observations on hurricane season?
Well, the predictions are that we're going to have a busier than usual season. I think, you know, the concern on it, and we've seen a lot of reinsurance buying in the background, a lot of industry loss warranties have been bought in the background. There's clearly a concern with the impact of what the financial markets have had on insurance companies' balance sheets. To go through a worse than normal hurricane season would not be great. So I feel that most of the carriers are buying more product to protect themselves. So we understand that the Florida renewal season has completed. There was winners and losers in it, and we feel that everyone's actually in place, coverage is in place. So, you know, it's going to be, you know, an interesting year to see, but I think the market is protecting its balance sheet even further to make sure they're in a stronger position to pay valid claims.
Thanks, Chris. And then just building on that, there's a question that maybe I'll direct toward Albert of the strong history and traditions of natural catastrophe cover and the tremendous amount of capacity that Bermuda puts toward natural catastrophe. How does that translate into the new mission for climate risk, and particularly the efforts to reduce the protection gap between economic losses and insured losses?
That's a great question, John. Thank you for that. So given where we are, for 2 reasons, I think, A, because we're an island, and then secondly, because we are the leading catastrophe market in the world, Bermuda is very connected to climate risk. And I think most people would agree that climate risk, although we're suffering from COVID right now, I think that most people would agree that climate risk is the #1 challenge for civilization, and needs to be a focus for all of us. We in Bermuda are very much focused on, in the industry, are very much focused on how do we help communities across the world protect themselves and respond to catastrophes and the potential for climate change to create more volatility around climate events and more severity around climate events. And we also know very clearly that communities, societies, economies that have insurance as part of their resilience program actually recover more quickly and have a better growth pattern, an economic growth pattern than communities that do not have insurance. And so we spend a lot of our time, on the one hand, funding research into climate change so that we can get a sense of where, of how we can see severity and frequency increase, but more importantly, focusing on our social purpose. And our social purpose is to help communities, individuals, governments manage risk, transfer risk, and address those issues. And so many companies in Bermuda participate in a number of philanthropic projects to try and enhance the coverage, in particular to communities that are underinsured and that find themselves significantly exposed both to climate risk and to climate events, but then secondly, to the economic hardships that follow. And so, for example, Axis and others belong to the Insurance Development Forum, which is a unique body, which is a partnership between the UN, the World Bank, and the insurance industry to try and provide, as one of our mission, is to provide insurance protection to 400 million, excuse me, to 400 million individuals across the globe who are currently uninsured and who are at the greatest risk of peril. And that includes providing our data capabilities in terms of modeling, our structuring capabilities in terms of facilities. Then they can be market facilities, they could be parametric facilities, but also helping governments develop the right regulation to allow for risk transfer, to allow for, I apologize, to allow for risk transfer, to allow for the ability to create facilities that would deliver insurance. So we're focused very much, the entire industry, in first, better understanding the risk, number one. Number two, everybody in the insurance industry knows the best claim is the one that doesn't exist. And so it's preventing the claim. How do you manage to reduce the impact of loss events through greater resiliency? And so sharing our data about how you can improve resiliency to climate events, and then making sure that there is enough coverage and protection for everybody, both developed economies and also in particular the developing economies that do not currently benefit from insurance. So there's a number of areas that we can work on to help, I would say, society, to help our civilization address climate risk and develop resiliency strategies against it.
Well, Albert, thanks very much for that. And thanks for also raising the Insurance Development Forum. The work that's being done there, with including Bermuda's participation and contribution, is significant. And if folks are not following that group, they should. And feel free to reach out to me if you need more information on that group. Kirsten, there is a question that's directed specifically to you, of your view of the hardening or firming market post-COVID-19, particularly in your space.
Yeah, thank you, John. I always try and sort of contrast the pre-COVID marketplace with the current COVID marketplace, because a lot of the trends that we're experiencing within current COVID were already existent. So capacity retrenchments were already a feature of the marketplace before the pandemic hit. The pandemic has only served to deepen that trend, and now we're seeing capacity compression that's creating severe issues for a number of segments, particularly in healthcare, as you can imagine. And it's within that I think there's great opportunity for Bermuda to help solve some of those capacity issues. We're seeing coverage retrenchments prior to COVID. That is going to continue to be a feature, and obviously is only deepening as COVID itself becomes a feature of the coverage conversations. And we're seeing a lot more concern and caution from our carrier partners around traditional coverages like batch that really are designed to address catastrophic issues and are now being applied to the systemic issues that are plaguing the industry. And additionally, rate, clearly a feature prior to COVID, but I would have said in February that we were starting to see signs that the rate increases, the pace of the rate increases was starting to flatten. That has gone out the window with COVID, and really is a function of the capacity compression and coverage battles that a lot of our insureds are facing in this current marketplace. So we are seeing fairly severe rate increases in some segments, and I don't expect that to slow down anytime soon. I feel like our carrier partners are in the eye of the storm right now, and they're exercising some degree of caution in their response with regard to the capacity they'll deploy and the go-forward coverage terms. So definitely COVID has had a profound impact on our industry, and particularly, as you can imagine, in the healthcare liability space. And I still think our insurers are working through where they're going to land on that. So it's definitely week-to-week changes within our space.
Thank you, Kirsten. There's a general question that I'll just open it up and ask anyone on the panel to contribute to. I think the listeners are in tune to the capacity and product differentiation from Bermuda, but it's asking really what's the differentiation between the Bermuda market and other global markets on the relationships between buyers and the market. Building those relationships. Anyone?
Oh, go ahead, Albert.
Sorry.
I saw you gearing up. Go ahead.
I was. I think one of the things that I would mention is that one of the values that we have in the DNA of the Bermuda insurance market is that this is a market that's always responded to volatility. We have a risk appetite that's actually willing to take volatility, and many markets and many companies are afraid of volatility. They've tried to reduce volatility, and that's the reason, the raison d'être in many ways of the Bermuda reinsurance industry is the fact that we have been able to find capital that is willing to accept that volatility, and we make that appetite for volatility available to our customers across the world, again, to help them reduce it. So when the world becomes more fearful, when the world becomes more afraid of risk and volatility, I would say that the value proposition of Bermuda actually increases.
Can I just add to the question as well, and I'll come at it from a slightly different angle. You know, I've grown up in the Bermuda market, and I was a young 20-something when I first started in the industry, and immediately I'm interacting and getting access to risk managers from the largest companies in the world. And those interactions create relationships that last throughout your career, and they're a profound part of how we do business in Bermuda. And I think this touches on what both Chris and Heather were saying, that face-to-face relationship has always been a critical part of our service delivery and the sort of the promise, let alone the claim payment. It's been a key part of our model, and obviously we're having to adjust to to this new world where that face-to-face element has been removed, hopefully temporarily. But I think it's critical as a market that we figure out how we can move forward, bearing in mind that personal touch and that engagement with these large and complex, extremely sophisticated buyers is a key part of who the Bermuda market is.
And I'm going to break the cardinal rule as being a moderator, but I'm going to chime in with an answer myself. When I was a U.S. insurance commissioner, I really saw the value add that the Bermuda market brought for liquidity, particularly for my smaller ceding companies. Post-event, particularly a natural catastrophe event, that's always the first thing top of mind for an executive team at a smaller ceding company. And the Bermuda market really outdid itself in the events that we had during my period of time of making sure those companies were comfortable with the cash flowing, and sometimes mid-event the cash would start flowing, and it really made a difference for those companies. Well, it's hard to believe, but our hour is almost finished, but I would like to do a round robin for all of our panelists to take a minute or so and talk about the future of Bermuda, what the industry looks like, and how do you picture Bermuda 5 years from now? And Chris, if we may, we'll start with you.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's quite a timely question when we've seen that London has come out with this LMG report on where does London stand in the global world. And I think what I loved about that, it was great advertising for Bermuda because it showed that Bermuda was number 2 very, very, very firmly. For me personally, I hope we keep that position. I hope we close the gap. I hope we grow. And if we can be in this position in 5 years' time with a strong, stable market, with innovation, whether that be product, whether it be product addressing global warming, whether it be product addressing pandemics, I think we'd be a very proud place to be. And it's about maintaining this position.
Great, thanks, Chris, very much. Heather, we'll turn to you. What do you see Bermuda looking like, the market looking like in 5 years?
I think it's an interesting question. It's a good question. It's an impossible question to answer because I think no one knows what the market's going to look like in 1 year, let alone 5. But I was really thinking about how to answer this. And one of the cornerstone values of Convex, that I helped think about was that we must continue to earn our reputation every day. And I think that there's a similarity between trying to do it at Convex and what we're thinking about with the Bermuda market. We've got a great reputation in Bermuda and an excellent, strong track record, and echoing the incredible thoughts of my fellow panelists today in terms of extraordinary human capital, speed to market, all of those things. But I think it's important that we don't rest on our laurels and that we continue to earn our reputation every day as the Bermuda market and continue to proactively work together, as one voice, not only as the Bermuda market, but also, the insurance market as a whole, adapting to the needs of our clients and really trying to understand those needs better, putting the clients at the heart of everything that we do, understanding the changing risk landscape with new and transparent products supported by our great regulator here. And Chris, I think embracing new technology and innovation is really going to be an important differentiator for us in Bermuda. So I don't know where the future will be in 5 years. I have great confidence in all of us down here and actually all of those people that we work with, because the Bermuda market is not just those of us sitting in Bermuda, but it's those that we work with around the globe. And I'm really confident and see a bright future.
Great, thanks Heather very much. Kirsten, how do you paint the picture for Bermuda in 5 years?
Well, of course, I can't not view the future without viewing it through a lens of COVID. COVID has been and will be such a shaping force within our industry. So I'm going to hone in on the two issues that I think COVID are really sort of bringing to the forefront, and that's coverage and capacity. And there are needs for both. Our clients have needs for both. I anticipate over the next 18 to 24 months, we're going to have a lot of in-depth coverage conversations. Prior to COVID, I was sort of predicting a coverage hard market. And I think we're going to have to work through the nitty gritty of some of the coverages that Bermuda's on the forefront of. And again, I highlight integrated occurrence and batch. There's a great opportunity for Bermuda to resolve some of the issues that are swirling around batch going forward. And I think we have to have a lot of conversations to get through that. So short-term kind of answer to that. And then as regards capacity, clearly there's a capacity compression right now. There are clients that need more capacity than they're potentially able to get in the marketplace. And that's why I'm sort of saying, are we looking at 5 years from now, we've had a class of 2020, 2021 that steps in to fill some of the capacity gaps that we're experiencing in the marketplace now. So I don't know, of course, but I certainly think there's opportunity presented by both problems.
Thank you, Kirsten. And Albert Benchimol, CEO of Axis Capital, you get the last word today.
Oh boy. Bill Gates, said that, we humans tend to have a capacity to overestimate change in the next 2 years and underestimate change in the next 10 years. So I think we have to be humble about our ability to predict the future. But I will say this. One of the things that I find very exciting is that I cannot tell you what it will look like because it will change. There will be opportunities, new products, new needs. And one of the things that I feel really good about is that I know that Bermuda will be at the forefront of that innovation. And I wanted to, if you don't mind, I'd like to take you to the past to talk about the future. And the reason that I feel that Bermuda is going to be at the forefront of that innovation is because it's demonstrated a track record of agility, of entrepreneurialism, of responsiveness. So what will I tell you? I'm absolutely confident that the DNA of Bermuda is one that is hard to replicate elsewhere. And so it's not obvious to me that we're going to find tomorrow a new jurisdiction that can attract capital as quickly and as easily as Bermuda can. So I still see it as a very strong component of capital to support risk, number one. And number two, I would say that we will be looking for new ways to solve the problems of the future, whether it's COVID or other aggregating risks, where the issue of capacity, of sufficient capacity, really have come to the fore, which COVID has demonstrated. So I think we'll be there. So my point is, I don't know what it will look like, but I do know that Bermuda will remain relevant to the risk transfer industry. It'll likely have a larger capital base than it has today because of its attractiveness, and it will remain at the forefront of innovation. I have a lot of confidence about that.
Great, thank you very much, Albert. Please join me in thanking our panelists, Kirsten Beasley from Willis Towers Watson, Albert Benchimol from Axis and chair of the Association of Bermuda Insurers and Reinsurers, Chris Bonard from Ed Broking, and Heather Kitson from Deputy Chief Executive Officer at Convex. Let me also thank Jasmine DeSilva from from the Bermuda Business Development Authority, and also Justin from RIMS for helping us get organized here. And this is the first of 5 series, so I encourage you to take a look at the website at RIMS and BDA, and there'll be every Wednesday for the next 4 Wednesdays. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, John. And thanks to our host, Jasmine DeSilva. Jasmine has some messages for the global attendees.
Yes, and I need to take the time to thank you all myself as well. I'm incredibly impressed and fortunate that you've taken the time out to really express this message of continued resilience, rigor, and relevance that the jurisdiction promotes. And so as a part of my job at the BDA, I want to thank you for that. And thank you, John, for moderating and directing. This has been a great discussion. I don't think there's a better way that we could have put forward this 5-part series. So thank you for that. And you know, John said it, you know, if you have any sort of questions or anything that you'd like to follow up with, contact us at the BDA website, follow us. But please, please, please sign up for the other webinars, because they will all be just as great as the one that we have today. So Justin, go ahead, we can close this out.
Sure. You can visit rims.org to find the registration page for any and all of the Bermuda series. A copy of this webinar will be archived on Risk Knowledge on Opus Ed within a few days. The RIMS Bermuda 2020 webinar series continues June 10th at 12 p.m. Eastern with the session Managing the Increasing Cost of Catastrophe. Visit rims.org to register for that session and others. We look forward to seeing you every Wednesday through July 1st. It's going to be a great summer. Thank you and stay safe.